Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second speaker on this open day for the 164th edition of the International Photography Exhibition here at the Royal Photographic Society. Our second speaker is Laurie Beck Peterson, who is a US-based artist specializing in 19th century non-silver photographic processes, namely bichromate, cyanotype, and palladium. Her work explores themes of impermanence and growth and decay of the natural world. Her most recent work utilizes sustainable plant-based printing methods. Works from two of Beck's series are included in this edition of the IPE. The first one is from the series We Fall Down, and the second is Visible Obscured. I'll let you take it from here. And
okay, great. Well, thank you.
You want me to keep this alive? Keep this on, yeah?
Please keep it alive.
Okay.
Hi. So thank you so much for inviting me here to speak and to including two of my pieces in the exhibition. Thank you guys for attending. And I want to say a special thank you to my friends back in the States who probably have insomnia or set their alarms early to get up to hear me speak because it's 6:15 a.m. there. So thank you all. And thanks for the introduction. I should say that I began my work my career working as a commercial photographer for the Eastman Kodak Company following graduation from Syracuse University. And that started me on a 30-year plus journey in the commercial world before I turned my attentions back to my personal work in alternative process. And I thought, I don't want to make an assumption that everybody knows how alternative process works or what it is. So I thought I'd give a little quick description of the process and how it works. So these processes come from the 1800s, and processes like gum bichromate, cyanotype, platinum palladium, salt printing, and Van Dyke brown all rely on the power of the sunlight or a UV light source to create the image and create the reaction that creates the image. So chemistry is coded on printmaking paper, and in my case, sometimes on tree stumps. There's the image is formed when I put this work out in the sun or sometimes in an artificial UV light source. And I think it's the simplicity of using the sunlight and hand-applied chemistry along with the slowness and unpredictability of shooting in film with a pinhole camera or a Holga camera that really excites me and is why I'm drawn to this process or to this kind of work. And I consider this slow art. So this is all part of my slow art work. Is it not? I can do it. Did it not go? I don't know. Oh, well, there we go. Oh, I was going up, sorry. So today I'm going to present my gum bichromate work from Visible Obscured and a cyanotype series from We All Fall Down. And these are the series that the two pieces that are in the exhibition come from. And then following that, I'm going to go sort of into the natural progression of my work, which is now working in eco-friendly, sustainable work or plant-based processes such as anthotypes and chlorophyll prints. So this piece for John is from the series from Visible Obscured, and it's included out in the gallery. And I thought I would read you my artist statement from each series that I'm going to show you to sort of set the stage for what you're going to see. And the gum bichromate prints of trees and woods that are part of this series explore the symbiotic relationship between process and subject matter. Woods and trees evolve over centuries. The cambium of trees grows in rings, then divides to create new tissue. Some of this tissue dies each year to become part of the outer bark. The trees themselves grow, die, and eventually become soil, out of which grows more trees. Layering and revealing, adding and subtracting all play, I'm sorry. All play a dynamic role in the process of the trees, but also in the process of working in gum bichromate. And it affords me the opportunity to align myself more with like the elemental forces of nature and So this first piece is a really special piece for me, and I'm going to end with a piece that was photographed at the same time. But the one thing that I want to point out about my work in gum is that I'm the decision maker of how I choose for you to see this work. I work with layers of gum bichromate, layers of watercolor pigment that build up to form sort of what I consider the final image. And I have the choice of how I render this and what colors I choose to work in. This particular piece is made by using multiple layers of lamp black watercolor pigment. And I did that specifically to call attention to the knot in the tree and sort of that very, very contrasty area, but then to allow you to look behind it and see all the layers that make up the background. And I think that the important thing that I'm looking for is what's really going on in the cycles, the natural cycles of the forest. And I find that this time of year of shooting when there are no leaves on the tree, the dormant periods really allow me to sort of see the spaces and see the way the light hits the landscape at various seasons and various times of the day. Sorry about that. I'm having trouble with the Can you come up here just 1 second? I'm just having trouble with the speaker notes. I can't get this, so just use my hand. Yeah, I can't find it. There we go. Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse. Gotcha. Okay, great. Okay, now that we've got that settled. This is a pinhole image made in the fall, and it's a very small pinhole camera that I set down at the sidewalk area. And what I'm really interested in with this is the way that you're able to sort of go back forever into the trees that seem to go on and on and on, these trees that have no leaves on them anymore, suggesting that we're at sort of the cycle of, fall into winter. And the series is made primarily in the Wissahickon Valley, which is one of the largest urban parks in the US, if not the largest, and it happens to be right in my backyard. But I grew up in Rochester, about 5 hours north of Philadelphia, close to the Canadian border, where the weather's a lot like the weather is here, but it's known for sort of its darker, drearier weather, long winter, short summer. So the leafless landscape is very comforting for me because it's familiar. But I think that it really is often overlooked by popular landscapes that are more colorful in the spring and the summer. And generally all my images sort of have the same leafless look to them. Carpenter Woods Fence features a small area at the base of a hill that I hike every day. And the majority of the work from Visible Obscured is they're landscapes that I pass constantly, mostly every day or, at least once a week. And it's always a different view for me because the forest is forever changing. And so this particular area is down at the bottom of a hill where humans have trampled down the land so much that the Park Service came in and put a fence up so that we could restore this area because the Carpenter Woods area is a bird sanctuary. So now there's this whole regrowth happening and a rehabilitation of this area, which brings the, more native plants coming back, the butterflies, the birds. And so it's sort of a way of humans living, peacefully with the land by restoring it, when things start to decay. The thing that interests me mostly about this image is that it's a scene that I pass by frequently on my way to go visit family up in Rochester. And it's on the side of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And the trees that sort of dance along the top of the cliff and the cliff are sort of stationary for me. The trees, the leaves are falling and they're different. But what it does is it sets the stage for this fantastical sky that I see. It could be cloudy, it could be sunny, it could be looking like this, it could be flat. And so when I took this image, I sort of wanted to make this produce a sky that worked with some of the lines that were already in the image that I photographed, but to put some brushwork in there and create something new. And it's really, for me, just very amazing every time I drive by this area. I usually carry my plastic Holga camera with me whenever I am intending to make images. And this was a one frame that I made on a walk with a friend. And I think what is so interesting for me for this piece is that you have information about what's going on above the surface of the earth, but the reflection allows you to look down into what's going on. Not that this is naturally what's going on below the earth, because we know that there are roots and other things going on there, but the reflection sort of reminded me about, thinking just about how this whole forest is put together above the earth line and then down below. If anybody's ever photographed with a Holga camera, it's like it's the imperfect part of the camera that's the best part of the camera, because you never know when you're going to get certain light leaks or lens flare. It's really anybody's guess. It shoots at one particular f-stop. I use one 400 speed film, and if the light is an f8, at 400 speed film, the image is not going to render well. So this is sort of the scene that just presented itself to me, and I wasn't quite sure what the lens flare was going to look like in this, but the light that appears to be coming towards the viewer reminds me, for me, of this power of the sun that's helping to grow the trees, but that's also making my images, because they are formed by using UV or sunlight. And so I just thought this was a really sort of peaceful image that reminds me of, where my work really comes from. And this last piece was taken at the same time that the first piece for John was taken, and this is called Montezuma Tree. And this was a real pleasure to work on this piece, because there were a lot of happy surprises for me, such as I never really had intended for the sky to have that sort of green blue, but the Antwerp blue that I was working with actually landed in the right place. But it allowed me the opportunity to sort of create whatever I wanted to behind the tree. I could make that look like snow. I could make it look like sand, could look like a lake. And I think that is why the process works so well for me in making these images for Visible Obscured. The next body of work is from We All Fall Down, which was a project at the Schuylkill Center, another area close to my house, which is also part of the Wissahickon. And here's a statement about that work. The cyanotype work on paper and wood explore the impermanence of the landscape caused by invasive species. The cyanotypes on paper are sketches of history using this 19th century process, whose origins began as a means of documentation of flora and fauna. I present a series of prints that records the time when affected ash trees were intentionally removed due to the emerald ash borer infestation. The tree sections printed with cyanotype are record keepers of a different kind. The wood stumps, which I will show you, become sort of totems or significant points in the environmental history when the ash borer was introduced to the Western world through infested shipping containers. But once the ash trees die, they're removed and they're no longer an integral part of the forest. However, the remnant stumps are now colluding with the cyanotype for the remainder of their existence. So I'm sure this isn't a really great slide, but I wanted to show this because the works on paper were initially made so that I could just see the images I was taking and decide what I wanted to print on the ashwood stumps. But as I began to make the work, I realized that they were a very important part of this body of work as sort of these permanent historical records of what was happening as the forest was being cut down because these trees were dying. And so while I began treating these works on paper like a scientist or a botanist from the 1800s would have as, just like documentation or a blueprint, they quite quickly became part of the final exhibition of work. And I think that they really are very informative. So they were originally hung like this, just tacked up on the wall as unframed pieces. They've since moved on to become framed pieces of art. Two pair. This image is called Two Pair, and this is actually you will see it in a few slides later. This is the image that is on the ash stump that is presented in the gallery today. And it's one of the images that really, I feel, for me, was sort of telling the story of, how quickly the landscape has changed because these trees are being cut down. And I think it really is sort of this spooky image, especially the way the whole capture in the film allows me to have that dark vignetted edge. And then the blue of the cyanotype is such a powerful color that it really, for me, really symbolizes a lot about what this series is. Oops, I'm going the wrong way again. And Sawn is another one of the images that, really, for me, is sort of jarring. As you can see where they just hacked away at this tree and then left the stump there to sort of disintegrate and become a habitat for whatever's living in the forest. And it will, that stump, as all my ash stumps that are printed on, will eventually decay and die. They're ephemeral. So this was just a really interesting find as I was hiking around to do my exploration with the images. So the people who were cutting the trees down, the grounds crew, just decided to leave fallen logs in ways that people who were walking in the forest could go and sit down and rest and, give them another use before they decay and go back into the ground. So if you've never seen what happens when an ash borer kills a tree, oh, I get to use the pointer. Oh, there we go. You can see right here, this little sort of these markings. That is what happens when the ash borer goes between the piece of bark and the wood, and it's called the larval gallery. And that's what ends up killing the tree because they lay their eggs there, and then when the eggs hatch, they come out, and then you've got a lot more ash borers that have now hatched, but they've also killed the tree. So this was just, you just sort of see how the cycles are happening, with how this tree is going to naturally die caused by an invasive species rather than its life cycle. It's these kind of beautiful markings that are actually killing the tree. These were two trees marked for removal. They're no longer there. I did hike the trails a little while ago and was, interested to see, how much really isn't there anymore from the trees that have been removed. This is called bearing, and I think it's a nice example of really, when you start taking trees down, you have something new to look at behind the scene that was familiar to you. But it also leaves sort of these vacant holes, which will, other trees will grow too, but the ash borer infestation really is a large problem in the United States, and it's really decimating a lot of forest area. So this is the piece, this is called two-pair section, and it's printed on a piece of ash wood that was given to me at the part when I started on this project. And I'd never worked dimensionally before or on wood. So I needed to understand the properties of the wood. I wasn't quite certain how I was going to get an impactful image on the wood. Was all the cyanotype going to seep down into the wood and I'd have nothing to expose? Or, was I even going to get, any kind of exposure if I could get it to sit on the surface? Was it an image even going to be there? And I sort of landed, I just thought back to the other way that I work, and I coat my paper when I print in gum bichromate with gelatin. So I started coating my ash stumps with gelatin, and it actually gave a nice surface for the image to adhere to when I made the print. And so I was really excited to see how the cyanotype was living with the rings of the tree, and how as these stumps die and crack, the surface and the stump of the cyanotype becomes something new. And you'll notice if you see the cyanotype stump that's out in the gallery, there's a big crack, and I get to use this again, sort of running along here, that is just naturally happening. And this is ephemeral work. It eventually dies, it decays and it dies. This does not come back. But it's, it really is a totem or a marker of time of how you know, how we're living right now with a lot of the environmental challenges that we have. And I think the fact that the piece has now moved on to a new stage and is being presented here. It's been presented at many galleries in the United States, but it's being presented here with the crack in it, and pieces of bark may fall off of it while it's here, you know, showing more of the larval gallery. But that's my intent with this work. It's really to remind people of how fragile things really are. This is the image bearing on an ashwood stump, and I intentionally printed it this way because as I spoke to the open areas in the forest in the print, you can see up in here, you know, how all I'm really showing you is what's happening with the wood as it's starting to die. So I've left the open area sort of as a prominent part of that piece. And single tree, these trees are no longer there, but an artist friend did mention that they felt that this little area here was sort of like a bullseye marker of what needs to be removed. Most of these trees are all tagged, so you can see what's coming down, but I thought that the placement of my negative on top of the ashwood here was really, it was impactful for me. And there's the larval gallery again, and this was intentionally printed small in the center of the wood because, you know, the ash borer is removing the, you know, it's boring down between the bark and the wood. And then I sort of replicated that of what's happening to the wood. You know, I replicated it by a very small cyanotype print in the inside of the wood. And this is my nod to Anna Atkins, because who can't make a botanical print on top of cyanotype and not think of Anna Atkins. So this is just the ash leaves from the trees as they were being cut down. I realized that ash leaves die really quickly, so I had to collect them as soon as they, you know, as soon as they would cut these trees down. So I just laid the, I laid the leaves on the ashwood stump and exposed this one in my driveway. And the little story behind this piece is that unfortunately I rinsed the stump out well, but I didn't rinse my front steps off very well. So they turned blue for a while. So I have cyanotype front steps for a while. Okay, I want to move on into the eco-friendly plant-based process. There's not that much work here, but the ephemeral nature of the ashwood stumps has led me to work in plant-based processes with chlorophyll prints and anthotypes, because I have been able now to sort of embrace the fact that my work dies. And that's okay with me. It wasn't at first, but I've warmed up to the idea that this work does die, and that's all part of these life cycles that I'm exploring. So the eco-friendly works are impermanent, and once completed, they begin the process of dying and disappearing. So this work started during the pandemic when I had really a lot of time to think about my materials. And so this non-toxic work that I'm starting now is very exciting to me. I obviously started with a landscape, but this subject matter wasn't working for me with this anthotype. And an anthotype is basically just, this happens to be beet juice that I combined with a little Everclear and coated on a piece of printmaking paper and put a positive on top of it, stuck it in the sun. There is no processing, there's nothing left. You pull the positive off and the image has actually made itself if it's received enough sunlight. But, you know, I went through explorations of my older work and I really wasn't feeling this work until I started adding the human figure into the work. And this piece happens to be, this is made out of pokeberry. I started exposing it in the spring of last year, put it away because nothing was happening, restarted exposing it in August, and it is now, this isn't a great slide, but it's part of Malin Fabre's book of anthotype emulsions. And I thought what was really sweet about this is that Malin took the time to put all of our recipes in this book, so other people interested in working in pokeberry or working in anthotypes can sort of see what's working, time of day, the kind of paper, the emulsion. So that brings me to synthesis, which is the final work that I'm going to show you. And it's an evolving project exploring the human figure through chlorophyll printing, an alternative process that involves photosynthesis, and natural leaves in combination with positive transparencies are exposed to sunlight to create the resulting image. So there's no camera, there's no chemicals, it's just nature. And, you know, the work takes as long as it takes. It depends on the sun. It's not up to me. It depends on the time of year and how strong the sun is, whether or not the leaf prints and lives, sort of lives for you to see it, or if it just happens to die before you even have a print to look at. But I have to embrace the unpredictable process and become comfortable with work that begins to die once it's finished. And I ask the viewer to also embrace these ideas, the experience of time and memory and loss. So just quickly, I felt like the figurative work that I have was really a sort of an obvious for these leaves, because this is my nephew David's back, and he had just had surgery for scoliosis. This is called David's scar. But I loved how the veins of the leaf, as they started bleaching back in the sunlight, started creating this other like skin around David's back. And then eventually this whole leaf is just, there will be no image left. But for the time being, I'm really enjoying watching it sort of change form. This piece, Beth, started as a larger image of Beth standing in a big forest with a lot of trees. And Beth is an artist friend of mine, and she's wearing her depression hat, which is part of her painting a series that she's done in painting. But the other work felt they made Beth look very sort of vulnerable in the forest. And when I started working in chlorophyll, I felt like a very tiny leaf for Beth was really perfect, because this is a safe little space to show the image of Beth in. And I have no idea what leaf that was. I just picked it one day. This is Riley's legs. These are actually my daughter's legs in a pool of water, but I separated them out and let them sort of float among the leaf. So you don't see any of the water that she's in, but you do see what represents sort of like movement of water by the veins of the leaf. And this is Nest in Hand, just an image that I've been working on for other work that I thought was represented well in chlorophyll. And the man in the doorway reads in a similar way as David's back for me, but I think that I really just enjoy the light behind the figure. You don't know where this figure's going. You can assign any amount of thoughts to this piece as you want to, and that's really why I enjoy it. So I need my laptop now. I'm going to finish with a final piece that, thank you, that was actually one of my first chlorophyll prints. And it's a musical composition that my father wrote. My father is here today. And he wrote this composition for my brother, and it's called 3 Episodes for Timpani. They are both percussionists. And originally it was to be a Father's Day gift for him. And so my brother sent me the music. I made a positive, I printed it. And then I thought, my brother performed this at his senior recital when he was in college. So I put an excerpt of music with this. So it was a family collaboration that they didn't know they were collaborating with me on, but it became that. And I did give it to my father for Father's Day 2 years ago. And he has the original leaf, which is, I think, holding up sort of at this point. But that's it.
Do we have any questions for Laurie?
Yeah.
Have you experimented at all? So you spoke about done by chromate. Have you experimented at all with some of the other ink processes, like brome oil, for example?
I have not, but there's a gum oil that I'm wanting to try. Somebody made some casein pigment from the dirt around my building, and it's a beautiful earth color. So I'm thinking, they have that. They were oil painting with that casein, so I'm thinking of trying some gum oil prints, but I've not done brome oil. No.
So this sort of interaction between photography and essentially being an artist,
Right.
and bringing that together. And
Yeah.
those processes act as that point of juncture for that. And I think it's some of that work you'll see in the exhibition upstairs is incredibly strong.
Right. Right.
It brings the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Hi, I'm an engineer, and I'm interested in what you mean when you say you think positive to then create the image. Just gone through that.
Sure. So I take the film negative that I've made and I scan it. And then I take the scan and it's a direct one-to-one contact printing. So I have to make the negative the size of my print. I enlarge it to whatever size I am printing. And then I print that out on a piece of Pictorico film. It's an inkjet negative. And so, or it's an inkjet positive in this case. It's an inkjet negative in the gum bichromate work and the cyanotype work. But in some of the plant-based processes, you're using a positive.
And you lay that on.
You lay it right on the leaf
And just leave it in the sun.
and put a piece of glass on top and put it in the sun. You have to keep the leaf alive with some sort of a water source. So you're keeping the leaf alive as you're killing it, basically.
So what's the success rate?
Oh, well, there's more failures than successes. There are.
Do
I
you
mean,
have
this
many
is-
going at one time, you know?
Pardon me?
So do you have many of these running at one time?
Yes. And I probably should have included an image of that. The postman thinks I'm nuts because they usually sit out in front of the house and there's a couple of anthotypes going and a couple of chlorophyll prints going. And I'm coming out there every couple of hours and chasing the sunlight. I think that the making of this is just really very interesting because it's very unpredictable. I've learned that you can't commit to somebody and saying, I'll have 5 chlorophyll prints for your show. Because you might not, or they might be dead by the time the show starts. But I am experimenting with ways to preserve them that are that work with the properties of the leaf. I mean, I could encase them in resin, but to me that makes more of a paperweight.
Does the chlorophyll method work with artificial light?
You could use a UV light source, but you'd have to use it for a long, long time. I mean, the sun is the best source we have. So really, and the artificial light for me in this particular, I use artificial light for the other work, but for me, it's all comes full circle. The sun helped grow these things. The sun is helping make the print. They're making the print for me. It feels right for me to make the work in the sun.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Well, thank you very much
Thank
for that
you.
fascinating talk. Thank you very much.